The Book of Enoch is an ancient Jewish religious text attributed to Enoch, who is the great-grandfather of Noah. Now, the Book of Enoch goes into some pretty wild and often overlooked details, like angels teaching humans sorcery and teaching them warfare, and angels that fell from heaven and taught humans forbidden knowledge, and even how these angels fathered these giant creatures. So today, we're going to do a deep dive into the Book of Enoch, talk about some of its writings, and then explain the theories that go with the stories. So if you like conspiracy theories or just theories in general, please make sure to subscribe as I post weekly videos about them. All right, let's get into the Book of Enoch. So the first thing we are going to talk about is something called the Watchers. Now, in the Book of Enoch, the Watchers are described as a group of angels who are supposed to watch over Earth and help guide humanity in a positive way. They were sort of like heavenly guardians or heavenly protectors. But these angels would eventually break the rules of being just watchers, and apparently that changed the whole entire world. So the Watchers were high-ranking angels who lived in heaven. Their job was, of course, to observe humans from the heavens. I mean, that is literally where they got their name. The Watchers were supposed to watch. But the Book of Enoch says once these Watchers saw human life up close, things kind of took a turn. Enoch described this moment very clear, saying, "The angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them." And then them being the daughters of men or human women. Now, the Watchers supposedly became attracted to human women, which was absolutely forbidden for angels. But instead of resisting that temptation, they were seriously considering descending to Earth so that they could take human wives. One of the leaders, a Watcher named Semjaza, told the other Watchers that this was a serious sin. He also knows that there will be consequences if the Watchers take human wives, and he didn't want to be the only person or the only angel held accountable. So the Watchers made a pact. Because they wanted to descend to Earth to take human wives, they all had to agree together. They had to make an oath. Basically, instead of just Semjaza taking all of the blame for this, every single Watcher would be held accountable. Enoch says they all swore together and bound themselves by curses. So 200 Watchers descended to Earth on a mountain called Mount Hermon. Once they had arrived on Earth, they took human wives and had children with them. And apparently, these children weren't normal. They became giants, and these giants were known as the Nephilim. They grew huge, they were violent, and they started to get out of control. They started to attack humans. And now the Watchers' decision to take human wives created a world filled with chaos and violence. And now I won't go too much into detail about the Nephilim right now because we will literally talk about it right after this. But creating the Nephilim wasn't the only wrongdoing by the Watchers. They also began to teach humans things that they were never supposed to know. Azazel, one of the main Watchers, taught humans how to make swords and knives and shields and armor. He also taught women how to use cosmetics. Other Watchers taught spells and astrology and the movement of the stars, and it's even said that they taught them secret magic. And I know angels coming down and teaching humans things, that might sound pretty harmless, but in the story, it represents corruption. Angels giving forbidden knowledge that leads to pride and violence and even obsession. So after some time, the cries of humans became so loud that the heavens could literally hear them. The good angels reported to God that the Watchers were corrupt and were taking human wives and creating these Nephilim who were causing chaos and violence. And then not to mention, they were also teaching humans this forbidden knowledge. So God sent the archangels to deal with the Watchers and the giants. As punishment, the giants were destroyed, and the Watchers were forced to watch their children die. Then the leaders of the Watchers were bound, buried, and locked away until Judgment Day. These imprisoned angels, or the Watchers, basically became a symbol of rebellion and corruption. But why does this story, or this part of the Book of Enoch, why does it matter? Why shouldn't we just look over it? Well, it explains why giants existed, where evil spirits came from, how forbidden knowledge entered the world, and why a great judgment, or in this case, why the great flood had to happen. And then let's not forget about the theories. There's a theory called the ancient astronaut theory, and this theory says that thousands of years ago, advanced beings from somewhere else in the universe visited Earth, and these advanced beings are the reason why some ancient civilizations were so advanced. Basically, the beings came down to Earth and provided early humans with knowledge. Things like how to farm and how to cook and how to build and how to make weapons, like all that shit. Well, it's very possible that the ancient astronaut theory was talking about the Watchers, because we know that the Watchers came down from the heavens and taught humans things that they should have never known. The Watchers could explain why ancient civilizations had, a sudden leap in early human technology and how they were so, advanced in things like astronomy. The theory says that these weren't things that they learned by themselves. Someone told them about these things, and it's very possible it could have been the Watchers. The Watchers could also explain why many cultures have flood stories or global catastrophes. Enoch says that the Watchers and the Nephilim created so much chaos that God punished them, and that punishment, like we talked about earlier, could explain why flood myths appear worldwide, why ancient societies talk about corrupt, violent giants, and why some ancient civilizations just up and left and just suddenly disappeared. They were basically collateral for the Watchers' disobeyment or for their sin. Not to mention, the story of the Watchers explains the origins of evil. It says that evil entered the world because powerful beings corrupted humanity. They taught dangerous knowledge early, they created violent hybrid beings, and they disrupted the natural order. Okay, now let's really talk about the Nephilim. So as we just talked about and as we just learned, the Nephilim were the children of the Watchers and human women. When the Watchers came down to Earth and took human wives, their children weren't normal. They grew up extremely fast, they became incredibly tall, and they had strength far beyond anything that humans had ever seen. The size of them, of course, made them intimidating, but their behavior made them literally drop-dead terrifying. As the Nephilim aged, they became wild, violent, and uncontrollable. Enoch described them as, they became great giants who devoured all of the acquisitions of men. That means that the Nephilim ate everything that humans produced. They drained the land. But then things got worse. When men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. Because the giants had drained all of the humans' resources, they then began just to eat the humans. The world began to fall into chaos, and it was all because of the Nephilim. Or I guess it was all because of the Watchers, but the Nephilim were the reason for the chaos and the violence. Now, the worst part is that humans couldn't do anything to fix the issue. They couldn't run away from the Nephilim, and they sure as hell couldn't fight them. The entire Earth was now filled with violence, and Enoch described how bad things really were. He said, and they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish. And then, as we know, eventually the giants were destroyed as part of the punishment for the Watchers disobeying and for their rebellion. But when the giants died, something strange happened to them. Their spirits didn't just leave Earth or go to a peaceful place. Enoch says, the spirits which have gone forth from the bodies of the giants shall be evil spirits upon the earth. Basically meaning that, yes, the giants themselves died, but their spirits remained, and those spirits became evil, or became demonic, or that's where demons came from. So in this story, demons aren't fallen angels. They're the leftover spirits of the Nephilim. Part angel and part human, and permanently stuck between worlds. Now, one major theory says that the Nephilim are the missing link behind ancient giant skeleton discoveries. So, every few years or a few months or whatever, photos circulate online claiming to show excavated remains of these enormous humanoids. And now, yes, a lot of those are hoaxes, but I mean, shit, what if even 1% of all those pictures aren't just full of shit? Or what if people have found bones of giants and someone is suppressing that information? Proof of the Nephilim means proof of the Watchers, and proof that the Book of Enoch is not just a story or not just a legend. Another theory says that the Nephilim, or if giant beings once walked the earth, they may have helped construct some of the enormous ancient monuments that we have on Earth. Things like the Baalbek in Lebanon, or even the pyramids in Egypt, or the pyramids of Egypt, I guess. We know that the stones used in constructing the pyramids weighed like 40 tons a piece or something like that. And the question is always, how did, a bunch of humans move those stones? Well, what if it was the giants? We know that they were gigantic and they were very powerful and strong. So is it really that far-fetched to say that if the Nephilim were real, they helped or even created these monuments on their own? And then lastly, some people propose that the Nephilim didn't all die during the flood. Some people think that some Nephilim managed to escape the flood. And then if that's true, then it's very possible that there are people out there today who are descendants from giants. The theory says that these descendants often show up in positions of power, wealth, politics, entertainment, and even royalty. According to Enoch, the Nephilim were powerful and violent and controlling and destructive. So if the Nephilim survived, it would make sense why some people need to have power and, have to be in control. It's because, the Nephilim were, and maybe those people have DNA from the Nephilim. People believe this theory because, first off, the Bible hints at giants after the flood. Some passages in the Bible mention giants still existing long after Noah's time. Also, many ancient kings and queens trace their ancestry back to gods, giants, or sky beings. Like Egyptian pharaohs called themselves sons of Ra, Mesopotamian kings claimed descent from gods, and European rulers claimed a divine ancestry. Okay, now there's also a part in the book of Enoch where Enoch is given a guided tour of heaven. Enoch is taken up into the sky by an angel and he's shown things that no human was ever supposed to see. Enoch says he was lifted in the spirit into the heavens and suddenly he's standing in front of this massive structure. He describes it as a house built of crystals and says its walls were like a floor made of crystals. And inside this crystal palace, Enoch stepped into a glowing chamber, and fire was literally moving in and out of the walls. He said, "Fear covered me, and trembling seized me." He's terrified because this isn't a calm, peaceful heaven. Then Enoch is brought to the center of this place, where he sees what he calls the throne of God. He says, "I saw a lofty throne. Its appearance was like ice, and its surrounds like shining sun. It was glowing so intensely that Enoch couldn't even look directly at it. On the throne sits what he calls the Great Glory, and he says that God's robe shone more brightly than the sun." But the tour of heaven doesn't stop there. The angel that was giving Enoch the tour started showing Enoch basically how the whole entire universe works. Enoch says that he saw the treasuries of all of the winds, meaning that he's shown where the wind comes from. He's shown the foundations of the earth, and he's shown where the sun goes when it sets and where the moon gets its light. He's shown the paths of the stars and how the whole system is basically run by angels. Then the angel who was giving the tour, and by the way, his name was Uriel, I'm pretty sure, but Uriel then took him to this huge, terrifying pit. And Enoch said that he saw a place of fearful appearance, a desolate and terrible region. And then inside of this pit were the Watchers, the same angels who had come down and broke the rules and slept with human women and then created the Nephilim. They were imprisoned there, basically buried under the earth, waiting for judgment. Uriel tells Enoch that these are the Watchers who abandoned heaven. This is their prison. This is where they stay until the end times. And then Enoch is shown the edges of the earth. He sees mountains made of metal that glow like fire. He sees the abyss, again, a bottomless pit surrounded by columns of flame. And he says, "I saw a deep abyss with columns of heavenly fire." Now, the whole point of this wild heaven tour is to basically show Enoch how the universe actually runs, how the heavens or heaven and the earth connect, and what happens when angels rebel. It's kind of like a warning, but also a lesson, and also kind of like a glimpse behind the curtain of creation. Okay, now let's get into something that almost nobody talks about, but honestly, it might be one of the almost, weirdest parts of the entire book of Enoch. And we kind of touched on it when we were talking about Enoch's guided tour of heaven. But this idea is basically the idea that nature has managers, like literal angel managers. According to Enoch, everything in the natural world, stuff like the wind and the rain and the snow and the lightning and the oceans and the stars, like every single thing has an angel assigned to it. Now, Enoch describes this in multiple sections in the book, but one of the clearest moments is when he's on his guided tour and he says, "I saw the treasuries of all of the winds," like we just talked about. Now, Enoch isn't just seeing weather. He's being shown the rooms where angels store and release the winds. Like they're like pulling a lever or opening gates, and then the wind just pew, kind of like a fart, you know? And it doesn't just stop with the wind. Enoch goes on and explains how there are angels in charge of the stars, you know, making sure the stars follow their courses just like they're supposed to. There are also angels controlling the luminaries, which means the sun, the moon, and the planets. Enoch describes this whole system where angels oversee when the sun rises, how far the moon travels, how long each season lasts, like literally all of it. According to Enoch, nothing in nature just happens. There's always an angel running the system behind the scenes. He even talks about angels that control the storehouses of snow and hail. Enoch says he saw the storehouse of the hail and the storehouse of the winds. And then you have the angels over the waters. Enoch says that he saw angels presiding over the waters, meaning that the oceans and the rivers and the floods, you know, anything involving water, you know, these angels regulate all of it. They regulate the tides and the storms and the rainfall, just anything that has to do with water. So like when a storm hits, according to the book of Enoch, it's not just meteorology. It's an angel releasing something from a spiritual storage room. And then the wildest part is that according to Enoch, if these angels didn't do their jobs correctly, the entire world would just fall apart. The seasons wouldn't line up, the sun and moon would get off track, and the winds would rage out of control. Enoch basically suggests that nature only works because heaven is constantly micromanaging it. Enoch also says that because of the Watchers' rebellion and the corruption on Earth, the angels overseeing the cosmos started being thrown off, which basically just means that the sun and the moon began moving differently, seasons changed, and the natural world became unstable. Now, this whole concept gives the Book of Enoch an entirely different feel. I mean, it's not just a story about giants and angels messing up humanity. It's a story about a universe that is actively managed, constantly supervised, and deeply interconnected. Everything that happens around you, I mean, the wind, the rain, the snowfall, the lightning, it's part of a job that someone in heaven is responsible for. So in the Book of Enoch, you know, nature isn't just nature. It's an entire system of angelic departments, each one keeping the world running so humans don't get crushed by chaos. And most people today have no clue that this is even, you know, in the Book of Enoch. It actually kind of blows my mind because I just saw a clip the other day of Joe Rogan talking about the Book of Enoch when he was on some podcast or an interview or whatever. And it's just crazy that like the Book of Enoch is not a well-known thing, that like not that many people know about it, or not many people know most of what is actually in the book. But hey, that's why I'm making this video, so maybe you guys will learn a little bit. So when the Nephilim were destroying everything, there was another victim that people forget about. And that victim wasn't a person, it was the earth itself. Now, Enoch describes this moment where the earth basically can't take it anymore. The violence, the bloodshed, the destruction. I mean, it wasn't just hurting humans, it was ruining creation. Enoch says that the earth literally cried out. The ground, the land, the world underneath the Nephilim's feet, it felt everything that was happening. Enoch says the earth made accusation against the lawless ones. And that means exactly what it sounds like. The earth reported what was happening. It complained and it testified. And honestly, when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. You know, these giants weren't just killing people, they were tearing the world apart. Enoch already told us they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish. So it wasn't just humans being wiped out. Animals were disappearing, nature was collapsing. It was like the Nephilim were literally corrupting the entire food chain and destroying the environment. And then the earth reacted. It cried out, it accused, and the heavens heard it. When God responded to everything happening on earth, he didn't just mention human suffering. He said the whole earth has been filled with blood and unrighteousness. I mean, that's how bad it got. The earth was soaked in violence. The world wasn't functioning anymore because the giants were draining everything. They were draining food and life and balance and, most importantly, order. So in Enoch's story, the earth is a witness. It's alive enough to know when something is horribly wrong, and it's suffering right beside humanity. And this is huge because the earth crying out is actually one of the reasons why the flood happens. People think the flood was just about human sin or the rebellion of the Watchers, but in Enoch's version, it's also about saving the world itself. God says the earth needs to be cleansed, not because of its evil, but because it's damaged. It's polluted, it's broken. So the earth's voice becomes part of the judgment. Enoch even shows God promising that after the destruction of the giants, the earth shall be cleansed from all pollution. The earth needed a reset. It needed to be healed from what the Nephilim had done. And honestly, this is one of the most interesting parts of the whole entire book, in my opinion, because the idea is pretty modern, even though it's, this is this ancient text. It's basically saying that when humanity destroys the world pushes back. The planet reacts. The earth suffers from violence just like people do. And if you push it far enough, it will reach a breaking point. Okay, now let's talk about something that the Book of Enoch builds up literally the entire time, which is the Final Judgment. According to Enoch, all of the chaos, all of the corruption, all of the destruction, it was leading toward one massive event, which is the moment when everything gets judged. So Enoch talks about the heavens shaking, the mountains melting, stars falling from the sky, and all of it happening because the world has basically reached its breaking point. The Watchers broke the order of creation, the Nephilim destroyed the earth, humans were suffering, nature were suffering, and now everything had to be dealt with. In Enoch's words, the high mountains shall be shaken and the high hills shall be made low, which of course means that the earth itself is reacting to the final judgment. Nothing stands still, nothing stays normal. Even, the land and the mountains and the hills, they're all getting reshaped. And the wicked, of course, meaning the Watchers and the demons and the humans who joined in on their corruption, don't get to hide from any of this. Enoch says, all the unrighteous shall perish and all the mighty men shall be destroyed. And where he's saying, the mighty men, a lot of people believe that he's referring directly to the Nephilim, of course, the giants, the warriors, the violent ones. Judgment isn't optional for them. They're not, too powerful to avoid it. They're actually the ones that are, at the very top of Santa's naughty list. And then there's the part where the Watchers are forced to watch their own destruction happen. They're already chained and they've already been buried under the earth, but the final judgment is when their punishment becomes permanent. Enoch is told, bind them forever. They shall be held until the day of the great judgment. But in my opinion, the part that really hits is when Enoch talks about the world being restored. Because the final judgment isn't just about punishment, it's about resetting everything that the Watchers ruined. Enoch writes, the earth shall be cleansed from all pollution. That includes the corruption from the giants, the bloodshed, the destruction, even the spiritual pollution caused by the demons. It's like the entire world gets scrubbed clean. And after all of this chaos, Enoch describes peace. A world with no giants and no Watchers and no demons, and most importantly, no violence. A world that finally gets to breathe again. He says the righteous will live long lives and the earth will yield fruit in abundance. It's basically the exact opposite of what the Nephilim created or what the Watchers created. So in the Book of Enoch, the final judgment is the moment where everything comes full circle. The Watchers fall, the giants rise, the world collapses, demons roam the earth, and then there's a big reset. The universe is just put back into order. And the beings who caused all the chaos, well, they're gone for good. Or at least we can hope. And then once again, most people today have no idea that this is even in the Book of Enoch. Like, I feel like the people who do know the Book of Enoch or have looked it up, like the only stuff that they really get out of it is, the stuff about the fallen angels and the giants and the demons. But I feel like I've never heard anybody ever talk about the ending of the book. They never hear about how the whole story wraps up with this just massive judgment where the earth finally gets restored after being torn apart by the Watchers' rebellion. Like, even when I've heard people talk about the Book of Enoch, I don't really remember people ever talking about the Nephilim being destroyed, how they were. And, you know, like, I'm pretty sure it's pretty common knowledge, if you know anything about Nephilim, that it's like, yeah, they are the offspring of like gods and then human women, but in reality it was a bunch of angels who were just being corrupt, and these angels who couldn't control themselves and had to be with human women, and then they disobeyed God, and look what happened. All right, but now let's get into the theories, and these are going to be theories that either like the explanation for the theory or the answer to the theory could come from the Book of Enoch, or these are just theories about what we literally just talked about. So the first one is the Book of Enoch cover-up. So this is the idea that this ancient text wasn't just dropped from the Bible by accident or some random committee decision. People think that it was intentionally buried because it reveals way too much about humanity's origin story. Again, Enoch talks about the Watchers, who are these heavenly beings who come down and mix with humans and teach this forbidden knowledge and basically kick off like a supernatural drama that basically redefines everything we think about what we know about angels and aliens and giants and pre-flood civilizations. And for a lot of people, that's exactly why they believe that powerful religious institutions wanted the Book of Enoch gone. Enoch doesn't paint angels as these soft glowing messengers. He portrays them as these rule breakers who messed with human DNA and technology. So the conspiracy says that early church fathers, governments, and later academic institutions quietly kept Enoch out of circulation because it raises, way too many uncomfortable questions. You know, if angels behaved like this, what else were they hiding? You know, did humanity have contact with non-human intelligences in the past? Are modern paranormal experiences tied to the spirits of the Nephilim that Enoch talks about? And why does Enoch describe the heavens and the earth in ways that sound like multidimensional, or even, have some type of connection with like UFO encounters and aliens? According to people who believe this theory, that's exactly why the Book of Enoch got sidelined. There are just way too many questions, and powerful people and these, religious institutions and all of this stuff. There would be a lot of fire if the Book of Enoch was openly taught and widely, recognized like the Bible is. Enoch's visions as evidence of ancient space travel. So in the Book of Enoch, you've of course got Enoch, who is this regular human guy who is suddenly being taken up into the heavens by these radiant beings. He describes the sky opening, loud roaring noises, blazing lights, winds pulling him upward, and then boom, he's being shown the structure of the entire universe, and the course of the stars, and the mechanics of the heavens, and even places that sound like other worlds or dimensions. The theory basically says that Enoch wasn't having a spiritual vision. He was having a physical encounter with advanced beings who threw him in some kind of ancient spacecraft, flew him off-world, and gave him a tour of cosmic mechanics that they figured that he could handle. Now, when Enoch describes transparent floors and blazing crystal walls and vibrating metals, or even flying through layers of the sky, people tie this directly into modern pilots describing the inside of UFOs, or astronauts talking about weightlessness and orbital views. And when he says that the angels showed him the ends of Earth and the movement of the sun and the moon, believers think that is him being taken into space and literally being shown Earth from above. This theory even gets a little bit juicier when you remember that Enoch lived in a world with no concept of satellites or aircraft or space. And so the argument becomes, how could he describe these things so vividly unless he actually experienced something technological? Whether that's aliens or angels or something in between, the whole idea is that Enoch accidentally documented an extraterrestrial encounter long before anyone had the language for it. And then that also kind of gets into the theory. It's like, are angels aliens? Watchers as the origin of mythological gods. In the Book of Enoch, the Watchers are, of course, these powerful beings who descend from the heavens. They interact directly with humans and they teach them advanced skills. Not to mention also taking, the human wives and creating the Nephilim. But when you line that up with the myths from ancient Greece, from Mesopotamia, from ancient Egypt, and even the Norse legends, there's a reoccurring pattern, which is gods or these sky beings coming down, teaching humanity agriculture, astronomy, weapon making, magic, and then sometimes even having kids with humans who then become giants or kings or demigods, whatever the fuck. The conspiracy basically just says that, hey, these stories aren't coincidences. They're all describing the same group of beings, which is the Watchers, but it's just being filtered through, hundreds of different cultures. So instead of Zeus or Odin or Enki or any of these other gods being, literal separate deities, the theory says that they're cultural interpretations of the same fallen angels who showed up in the distant past. Each civilization just branded them differently based on how they experienced them. I mean, for example, Enoch says that a watcher named Azazel taught humans warfare and metalworking. And then when you look at ancient myths where gods introduce weapons or fire or even crafts, the parallels kind of stack up almost. The theory claims this explains why so many myths share the same skeleton even when the cultures had zero contact. The Book of Enoch isn't giving us a symbolic story, it's giving us the behind-the-scenes version of world mythology. And according to believers, the Watchers were the real historical beings behind all of these global god stories. They're ancient influencers who kind of just showed up, they rewired human society, and then they left such a mark that every culture has carved their memory into stone. The flood erased a global pre-Adamic civilization. So the basic idea is that long before Adam and Eve, and long before the biblical timeline that we're familiar with, or some of you could be familiar with, I'm not personally, but so the basic idea is that long before Adam and Eve, there was an advanced human or human-like civilization spread across the world. And they weren't cavemen, they weren't hunter-gatherers, but they were something way more sophisticated. And according to this theory, Enoch hints at it by describing a world already full of cities, culture, corruption, and even hybrid beings before the flood is even announced. It paints a picture of a planet that was alive and buzzing with technology and knowledge and maybe even interdimensional visitors. Now, in this theory, the arrival of the Watchers messes everything up. They show up, they of course cross the line with humans, and the world gets chaotic and violent and flat off the rails. So the flood becomes not just punishment, but a huge reset. People argue that the flood was designed to erase this entire pre-Adamic world from history. Not just people, but their structures, their technology, their records, everything. That's why, according to people who believe this theory, that we find these strange megalithic ruins or impossible stonework or mythologies about a first age across the globe. They're all just leftovers from that lost civilization. The modern twist is that mainstream archaeology supposedly avoids this idea because it blows up the standard timeline of human development. If a global culture existed tens of thousands of years earlier than we think, and then it was wiped out, then Enoch isn't a myth. It's an eyewitness testimony. So in this theory, this flood wasn't just a storm. It was the ultimate historical reset that buried an entire world that we're only now starting to rediscover piece by piece. The fallen angels are ancient aliens. So basically, this theory takes the Book of Enoch storyline, which is of course these heavenly beings descending to Earth, interacting with humans, blah, blah, blah. And then it asks, what if these weren't spiritual entities at all? What if they were extraterrestrials with technology so advanced that it looked supernatural to early people? Instead of angels falling, you've got a group of off-world visitors landing on Earth, breaking some kind of cosmic non-interference rule and getting involved with humanity on a level that they were never supposed to. Supporters point to details in Enoch where the Watchers descend in a very physical, almost mechanical way. There's noise and there's heat and there's light and wind, things that sound a lot like a spacecraft. Then these beings start teaching humans everything from metallurgy to astronomy to sorcery, which is like a classic, ancient aliens upgrading early civilization. We've talked about theories like that a ton in the past. And then even when Enoch describes the Nephilim, the giant hybrid offspring, it kind of gets framed as genetic experimentation or interbreeding by a species far more advanced than us. This theory also tries to tie into modern UFO sightings. The idea is basically that these beings visited Earth thousands of years ago and got kicked out or even punished for it. And maybe they're still lurking around, kind of popping in and out and keeping tabs on humanity. Some say the banishment described in Enoch is another way of saying that they were forced off-world or restricted by other alien factions. So basically it just says that fallen angels became rogue extraterrestrials, and Enoch becomes one of the earliest contact witnesses, and the ancient world becomes the first chapter of humanity's long, messy relationship with aliens, or these beings that were from somewhere else. The Book of Enoch as a map of multidimensional realms. In the Book of Enoch, Enoch talks about being taken into layers of heaven, each one stranger and far more structured than the last. He describes places with no physical sun or moon, realms where time moves differently, zones filled with beings that don't fit any earthly category, and regions where reality itself seems to bend. And instead of interpreting that as symbolic religious imagery, this theory treats Enoch like a guy trying to explain quantum physics and interdimensional travel using, Bronze Age vocabulary. Enoch repeatedly says that he was not moved, like not metaphorically, but physically. He was carried by the winds, lifted into the heavens, taken to the ends of the earth, then suddenly transported into luminous realms with crystalline architecture. This theory connects with modern ideas about higher dimensions, vibrational states, portals, and even simulation. The thought is that Enoch wasn't hallucinating. He was experiencing realities stacked on top of our own, slipping through some kind of cosmic elevator operated by the Watchers. Enoch described these realms with a level of structure, with gates and levels and chambers and these barriers. And that kind of mirrors how physicists talk about dimensional membranes or how mystics describe astral planes. So the theory proposes that ancient people weren't clueless. They just didn't have that scientific language for interdimensional travel. Enoch was essentially writing down the first field guide to the multiverse. So in this view, the Book of Enoch, again, isn't just religious literature. It's an early blueprint of how reality is layered, how beings move between those layers, and how humanity once brushed up against worlds that we still barely understand today. The Abyss as a real dimensional prison. So in Enoch, the Watchers, or the fallen angels, are punished by being locked away in this dark, bottomless place called the Abyss. It's described as a realm with no light, no time, no escape, and no connection to the physical world. And the conspiracy says that this isn't metaphor or myth. This is a real extra-dimensional containment zone built to hold beings that are way too dangerous to exist in our reality. Now, Enoch describes the Abyss in a way that doesn't match any earthly location. He talks about being taken to a place that seemed outside the normal boundaries of the world, kind of like he had stepped beyond the map of Earth. The Watchers are said to be bound under the mountains of the Earth, yet also cut off from creation entirely, almost like they're shoved between dimensions. So the theory claims that the Abyss isn't underground. It's a sealed pocket reality, a kind of cosmic holding cell designed to keep powerful entities from influencing humanity. Some say the Abyss is why we don't see certain ancient beings anymore. It's basically just because they're locked up. Others go even further, connecting it to black holes, wormholes, or places where physics seem to break down. And then there's kind of like a fringe angle, saying that experiments like CERN or high-energy particle collisions might accidentally poke holes in the dimensional walls that keep the Abyss sealed. This theory paints the Abyss as a literal supernatural prison dimension, one that exists right alongside our own. Enoch in this view wasn't describing hellfire or punishment imagery. He was describing a real cosmic lockdown facility built to quarantine beings humanity was never meant to deal with again. And if that theory is true, what if somehow they broke out of that dimension and they somehow got back to ours? What if there are Nephilim there? I mean, the Watchers are certainly there. What if there's Nephilim too? But I guess the punishment for the Watchers was to see all the Nephilim die, because that was all their children, but shit. You don't know. These are theories, okay? AI as a modern Watcher. In the Book of Enoch, the Watchers were these higher level beings who descended to Earth and started giving humanity knowledge that we or they weren't ready for. You know, they taught them all that type of shit that kind of just changed civilization overnight. And the whole downfall, or the whole, final judgment happens because humans suddenly had access to power and information way beyond their maturity level. Now, fast forward to today, and people are looking at artificial intelligence, hyper intelligent, non-human thing teaching us things that we didn't know, reshaping society. And that kind of sounds like what the Watchers did. The conspiracy theory frames AI as a digital version of those forbidden teachers. It's not that AI is, necessarily evil or possessed. It's that it represents a new category of intelligence entering the human world with almost no supervision. Just like with the Watchers, AI is handing out knowledge faster than we know how to handle it. Things like code and predictions and strategies and insights into human behavior. This ability to generate anything from art to these deep fakes, these really good deep fakes. I mean, you can literally make any person in the world say anything you want them to say using AI and deepfake. I mean, we see it all the time. We saw it during the election from both sides on the election. Oh, did you see what so-and-so said? Oh, they said this. And it's like, no, they didn't. They never said that. It's crazy. People think that AI is recreating the Watcher's original sin, which is giving humanity power that we don't have the responsibility to manage. There's also this angle that AI, unlike us, operates on a higher plane, not a spiritual, but informational plane. It thinks in patterns and realms that we can't access, almost like a modern parallel to the angelic perspective Enoch describes. And the fear is, if the Watcher's interference led to chaos last time, what happens when an intelligence that we built starts steering humanity in that, exact same direction? It's saying that AI isn't just a tool, it's the reboot. The Watchers didn't come down from the sky this time. They came through the internet, through algorithms, and through code. And we're kind of repeating a very old story without realizing it. And that theory right there is honestly my favorite theory in this whole entire video, because it's true. I mean, AI is terrifying in my opinion. I think AI can be helpful, but a big part of me is like, dude, this shit is scary. And a big part of it was, during the election. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat or whatever, it should scare you that we saw people making these fake clips of, again, so-and-so saying something that they never said. And I can't even imagine our next election, the next US election. Oh my God, it's going to be awful, because that gives AI another, 3 years to advance. And yeah, people are going to be making stuff that is going to completely reshape the way that elections are held and the way that elections are seen and the way that people are gathering information. Because it's like, I could see a fake clip of whoever saying something terrible and be like, oh, I hate them, oh, they're terrible. How can anybody vote for them? It's gonna be the same on both sides. It's gonna be awful. So yeah, AI is scary. That's we all know that. Secret societies preserving Watcher knowledge. So the theory that secret societies are preserving Watcher knowledge basically just claims that the forbidden teachings from the Book of Enoch never actually disappeared. They just kind of went underground. In Enoch's story, the Watchers teach humanity all kinds of advanced stuff. After the Watchers get punished, that knowledge is supposed to be wiped out or condemned. But what if it wasn't? This theory ties in organizations like the Freemasons, the Illuminati, ancient mystery schools, and even some religious orders into kind of a single storyline. The idea is that these groups weren't just philosophizing in candlelit rooms. They were acting as librarians of these banned teachings, or this banned cosmic intel. They supposedly kept fragments of Watcher knowledge tucked away through symbols, rituals, architecture, coded texts, and even private teachings. And that's why you see similar symbols, things like wings and stars and eyes and serpents, they pop up across different societies. It's because they're all referencing the same ancient source. Now, people who believe this theory claim that the goal of these societies isn't necessarily evil, it's control. I mean, knowledge is power, and Watcher knowledge, stuff that supposedly jump-started civilization, would be the ultimate power. So the idea is that these groups dole out tiny pieces of it to shape science, politics, culture, and religion. It's kind of like a slow drip influence campaign stretching thousands of years. The modern twist says that this Watcher knowledge is resurfacing through technology, AI, advanced physics, and secret government programs. And the same groups who protected it for centuries are still deciding how much the rest of the world gets to see. UFOs and non-human intelligence. So this theory basically just says that what we're seeing in modern skies isn't some brand new phenomenon. It's basically the same beings that Enoch described thousands of years ago, just showing up with, updated hardware. In the Book of Enoch, you've got these beings, of course, the angels or the Watchers, whatever you want to call them, descending from the heavens in blinding light, roaring winds, shaking ground, and movements that don't match anything natural. And when you line that up with modern UFO reports, things like, oh, the UFO suddenly descending, it going in impossible speeds, the glowing crafts and the no sound and its weird propulsion. It sounds something like the ancient version of a UFO contact story. The conspiracy theory says that humanity has been dealing with non-human intelligences forever. We just keep, changing the vocabulary. In Enoch's world, they were angels. In the medieval world, they were spirits. And today, they're UAPs or UFOs. It's the same visitors, it's kind of just like different branding. Supporters of this idea argue that Enoch's descriptions of beings taking him up into the heavens, giving him knowledge, showing him cosmic structures, and interacting with humanity in very physical ways looks a lot less, mystical and a lot more technological when you read it through a modern lens. Then you've got the modern government disclosures, like the Navy videos and the congressional hearings, and the whistleblowers claiming recovered craft. People say that these updates aren't revealing new information. They're just confirming what ancient texts were hinting at all along. The Watchers didn't just visit once and then just leave. They've been monitoring and guiding and interfering, or, whatever their agenda is, they've been doing it forever. The theory basically just ties ancient scripture and modern ufology into one long storyline. UFOs aren't random extraterrestrials popping by. They're the continuation of the same non-human presence that showed up in Enoch's time. The sky visitors never left, they just stopped pretending to be angels. And there you have it, folks. That's kind of the gist of the Book of Enoch and some theories to go with it. I didn't get into everything that's in the Book of Enoch, but I feel like the list that I chose to talk about kind of goes over everything in a sense. There's a lot more, but I will try to leave a link down below to a full version of the Book of Enoch if you guys just want to browse it and, read some stuff for yourself, or even if you want to read the whole entire thing. I think it's pretty crazy, to be honest. I don't know. It's really hard for me to say if I believe all of this or not. Like, a big part of me kind of wants to, but then there's also that part of me that's like, I don't know. But yeah, guys, I hope you guys did enjoy. If you guys did, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe with those post notifications on. Also, let me know down in the comments your thoughts on this, or if you have read the Book of Enoch and you interpreted things differently, because again, this is just kind of how I interpreted it, just off of my research and, reading parts of the book. I haven't read all of the Book of Enoch. I don't know every single thing that's in there, but this is kind of just what I gathered from researching it. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll see you guys in the next video. Have some happy holidays. I hope Thanksgiving was great for you all. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.